Nowadays, the whole podcasting landscape is so competitive that if you don't have a way to differentiate yourself, you're not going to make it. It is what it is. It's super competitive. So, in today's conversation, I want to really talk to you about how to create a captivating podcast cover art. You need something like this to actually stand out, in a very competitive marketplace. So, here is an overview I really want you to pay attention to. So, the thing here is that before ever listening to your podcast, your audience will see your podcast artwork listed on directories and podcast platforms, right? And it's really important to understand that at that point they don't know about you. Maybe they haven't heard about you. Okay, so they're trying to. This is the first contact they have with your podcast. So how would you want that impression, that initial impression, to be? Something positive, something memorable. Remember, it's all about experiences. It's all about souvenirs. When you meet someone, how that person how that person made you feel the very first time around. That's what we remember the most, right? So you want to impress. You want to really impress your audience. Okay, so therefore, podcast cover art is one of the best ways to catch your listeners' attention. This is kind of similar to your YouTube thumbnail, okay? So the only thing is here we call it cover art because it's not a thumbnail really, okay? And it's really important to understand that a well-designed cover can provide a visual representation of your podcast, what it is about, and the host personality, your personality, you who are listening to me right now. By the way, welcome back to the show. It's just wonderful to have you here, to have this sort of convo every now and then about podcast and podcast art. Okay, so what I want to talk about here is that I want to explain to you the fact that podcast cover art has many great benefits, things that you really haven't thought about, including attracting your primary audience, of course, attracting your secondary audience, okay, and improving your branding, your overall branding. You can easily communicate what your show is about and the type of personality that is portrayed through your podcast. Very important. Remember, you're trying to familiarize your audience with your podcast. Okay, so designing your cover art can be a fun and exciting process. If you have a creative bone in your soul or in your body, whatever, you have the opportunity here to express your creativity and let the world know what your podcast is all about. But the thing is that if you're not as creative as I am, for example, well, you can always outsource the whole thing. I'll speak about that later on, okay? Let me give you the approach that really can help you here when it comes to creating your podcast cover art, okay? But before I do this, let me just talk to you about the requirements for podcast cover art. So when you choose a hosting platform for your podcast, each directory will have its own technical requirements for your podcast art. So what you want to do is you want to really familiarize yourself. You want to acquaint yourself with the requirements of the specific platform where you currently are at. Okay, so you will need to meet these requirements to get your podcast approved. So while each directory has its own requirements, many of them are similar. For example, let me just show you on the screen. We're going to put this on the screen. The artwork requirements for Apple Podcasts, which gave you a good indication of requirements across the industry. So you have a 1400 by 1400 pixels for shows submitted via the RSS feed. We're going to put this on the screen, okay? We have 3000 by 3000 pixels preferred, and the square, so that the cover art should be a square or a 1-to-1 ratio, okay? By the way, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about how to create a captivating podcast cover art. So it's really important to understand that if you don't have the proper dimensions, the proper sizes, you might actually run into problems. Okay, some platforms, some directories are stricter than others. Okay, it really depends, and you may also be prohibited from including certain content on your cover art. For example, avoid blurry or pixelated images, violence or inappropriate content, explicit language, and marketing copy that may go against a platform's policies. Just think about it. Would you want your son or daughter to actually watch this cover art, or would you want your grandfather or grandmother to actually watch this cover art? So please just think about that as you create or have someone create that cover art for you. Okay. And so one thing I want to say here is that just make sure that you design or have someone design for you podcast cover artwork that will look great at various sizes, because they may vary in different places across the platform. For example, you could have your podcast cover, directory listings, or thumbnails. Okay. In addition, compress your file to optimize your podcast cover art for mobile users. Remember, a lot of folks are just listening to podcasts nowadays, via mobile. So let me give you a few pro tips before we actually get into the nitty gritty here. It's important to understand that I'll speak about the steps very soon, but there are key elements that are always present in great and impeccable podcast cover art. Remember, when we talk about podcast cover art, we're speaking about something that is like attractive, right? It must be captivating. It must be alluring, because the whole thing is you want the target audience, the primary audience, the secondary audience to click on that cover art to learn more about your podcast. Okay, so while it might be tempting to put as much as you can in your podcast art, you want to begin your design process by choosing just a few simple elements to include. For example, you may want simply an image or a logo with a few words. Okay, and because the thing is, if you include too much on your cover art, it may be hard to decipher at smaller sizes. Remember, we have to think about the mobile experience here. It has to be a very interesting, it has to be a positive and pleasant mobile experience. Okay, and so in addition, if you have a lot of content, it can take away from what you really want your audience to notice. Okay, so remember that the lines and shapes on your cover art will help direct a viewer's eyes, so you can choose a real image or an illustrated image that conveys the subject of your podcast or the host of the podcast. You also want to consider what would resonate with your audience. For example, if you have a podcast about fitness, you could choose to depict some workout gear, or if you discuss current event, you could use an image of yourself as the host. Also, I want you to think about colors and typography. So those actually can help create an overall tone for your podcast. So, but again, here we are speaking about, I wouldn't say minimalism, but we're speaking about like the fewer the better. You want to stick to a few main colors to avoid overcrowding your cover art. Warm colors can create an energizing mood, while cool colors are more calming. You could also choose one or two fonts that match the style of your art. And but very important, make sure that they are legible. They must be readable, okay? And you want to select a font size that doesn't take over unless you do so intentionally, but can still be read in smaller sizes. I mean, the bottom line here is we want to constantly think about the smaller sizes, the smaller devices, the smartphones, okay? Very important, because a lot of your viewers, no matter where they're located, will be listening in via mobile. Now, let me give you the steps here that you need to really pay attention to. How do you create podcast cover art that is impeccable, that is very attractive? Now, remember that once you have actually identified the elements you want to include in your cover art, you can move forward to the design process. You can either design your podcast cover art by yourself using a graphic design program, or you can hire someone to do it for you. It's totally possible. It depends on depends on, again, as I said earlier, the creative bones in your body. So, but by the way, before I go further, I want to remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about how to create a captivating podcast cover art. So let me first talk to you about the DIY sort of option. Do-it-yourself podcast cover art. So there are a lot of programs out there. They're available to help you design your own podcast cover art for free or cheap, really. So you have Adobe Spark. So Adobe Spark includes Illustrator, the program. You have Photoshop and Spark, which makes it easy for beginner designers to use the podcast cover art creator. Actually, they do have a podcast cover art creator, okay? So you can use one of the templates and then customize the font, the text, the colors, and images. So totally possible. You also have Canva. So Canva has a free and paid version that allows you to use templates or blank canvases to create your own designs. And you can choose from Canva's images, fonts, and other design elements. And the cool thing is you can actually get started really easily. You can get started by creating an account and then create a blank canvas sized at 3000 by 3000 pixels, which are really the size requirements for Apple Podcasts, for example. You also have TaylorBrains. So TaylorBrains has an AI artificial intelligence program that generates logo options based on answers to some questions about your brand and design goals. Okay. And the cool thing about Tailor Brands is that you can also customize the generated design. So if you don't like what Tailor Brands, their AI algorithm is actually, given to you, you have the opportunity to customize it to actually make sure it fits the goal, it fits the target audience, it fits also the purpose of this cover art in the first place. So overall, so those are the three. I mean, there are many more. There are many more tools, but those are the top three tools that you can use to actually create your own, to actually have your own design podcast cover art. Now, let me talk to you about hiring someone to design your cover art for you. Now, the thing here is that if you have, let's say, if you have a marketing budget, you may choose to invest in hiring a professional graphic designer to create your cover art. Okay. However, this can be expensive depending on the designer's experience. You can use different platforms like 99 Designs, Fiverr or Upwork, or even freelancers.com to post project summaries. Okay. And what we love about those websites is that they're relatively cheaper. Like, you don't have to spend thousands of dollars. You know, our own team, we actually run a lot of campaigns through Fiverr, 99 Designs, TopTal, Upwork, freelancer.com. So we know those, we know the rates. I mean, if somebody's charging you like 1,000 euros for cover art, that's because their rents, they live in a city where the rent they're paying is $1,000 for like a studio or something. But if you have someone who actually has rent, is paying a rent like $50, living somewhere across the world, and they're actually paying $50 for the same apartment, I mean, chances are they are going to charge you less, right? So this is why it's not about, because they're a low quality, that's why they're cheap. They're just only cheap because their cost of living is lower. Okay. So yeah. And one thing I want to say here is that if you actually post project summaries on those platforms, freelancers can then submit proposals and tell you about their experience, so you can choose one who can help you meet your goals. Okay. And also you can actually reach out to, let's say, a marketing agency. So instead of instead of contacting a freelancer, either online or offline, you can actually just outsource the whole operation to a marketing agency. So in this case, we're not just talking about creating a captivating podcast cover art. We're speaking about other things. We're speaking about SEO for your podcast. We're speaking about maybe email marketing for your podcast. So it's more about having an all-in-one sort of offer from a marketing agency. So this is actually what we recommend to podcasters who just started, but they already have a brand name, they already are known, they have name recognition. So if you have that, then it's a lot easier. You can actually grow real fast. But if you just started and you have no name recognition, it's just a lot better to contact a designer, a freelancer. Let me give you a bonus here. If you are still here, I just want to share with you some research we have done. It's really important to understand that when we talk about great podcast cover arts, we are going to show you a few on the screen here. We're going to show you Animation Addicts Podcast, The Comeback Jack Show, and Skip the Repeat. And the reason why I want to show you this to you is that you have a very simple yet sophisticated podcast cover art, and they all do the trick. They are able to resonate with their target audience. They are able to actually get the job done in terms of filling that sometimes elusive persona. They are able, like the listener persona that all podcasters should actually have a clear idea about. And you also want to have things like a way to connect with your audience. Okay, so when we talk about the Animation Addicts Podcast, their cover art has a fun design that clearly communicates what the podcast is about, right? It uses simple images of well-known animated characters, which helps to include a lot without being really overwhelming. And if you think about it, if you look on the screen right now, the color choice uses complementary shades of blue. They give a fun but laid-back vibe. Okay, and the fonts are readable and stand out amongst the colors and What about the other one? So you have the Combat Jack Show. So this cover art Cover art displays a good balance of detail with simplistic design elements that do not really overwhelm the listener, okay? And the combat helmet uses a realistic animation style that matches the background style. In addition to, so it's kind of cool. And in addition, the podcast titles font contributes to the overall theme of the cover, and it is large enough to read without taking away from the picture of the helmet. What about the third one? Skip the repeat. So this cover art actually uses contrasting colors to help certain elements stand out. However, it only uses a few colors, okay, so that it is colorful without being overwhelming. And the position of the people on the cover also gives a movement to the piece without being distracting, because they will be interacting with the front and center title. So overall, fantastic examples. Now, here is the decision I want you to make right now. So the thing is, you can choose to have a generic podcast cover art for all episodes of your podcast, or you can say, you know what, I want to have an episode. I want to have episode specific artwork. You know, like if you want to have, if you want to have to pursue a more like a movie theater, Hollywood sort of style when it comes to branding, you can do episode specific artwork. Okay. So in addition to your podcast cover, you may want to invest in creating episode specific artwork to have a design image for each of your podcast episodes. And while this may require more time, effort, or money from each episode, it can help to solidify the story for your listeners. Okay. It also gives you an opportunity to make each image specific to what you're talking about in each episode. And if you use similar design elements or styles, you can also use episode artwork to expand your brand and open up opportunities on social media or merchandising. For example, you can use the episode art as something new to post each time an episode is released. This is really good. And here is a winner strategy for you. How do you upload artwork to your hosting platform? Well, it depends, because each platform will vary slightly on how to upload your podcast cover art. Okay. And but fortunately, what we have seen in our research is that the process is generally pretty simple and can be completed in just a few quick steps. So you should be prompted to upload your artwork as you are setting up your podcast account, but you should also be able to access your account after the setup process so that you can add or edit your cover art at any time. Right? It's all about flexibility here, okay? And so one thing we have seen, our team has seen, is that adding episode specific artwork is also very easy. For example, if you take Captivate FM, they do have a simple settings page for each podcast episode. And so as you scroll down the page, you will see a spot where you can upload your artwork. And you should see this when you are posting an episode, but you can also click on any episode listed in your dashboard to edit it after you have posted it. Okay. So the process should be similar on other platforms as well. This is kind of similar to YouTube, you know, like when you think about YouTube with the video hosting platform. So for each video, you are able to actually change the artwork for each video. And then you have, the banner, what they call on YouTube, the banner. So you have the banner for the channel, but for each video, as opposed to each podcast, you have now, you know, episode specific artwork. As a matter of fact, YouTube has actually has recently come out with their own podcast section. So they'll be very interested in this. We're actually working very soon. We're going to have a review of a YouTube podcast section to see if it really adds up to what the with what Spotify and Apple Podcasts have been maintaining for the last few years now. So it will be really interesting. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. In today's conversation, I was just talking to you about how to create a captivating podcast cover art. So I give you an overview, the approach, the pro tips, the steps you need to follow, you know, the DIY versus hiring someone, the bonus, the decision, and the winner. Thank you. God bless you. I'll speak to you soon. But until then, remember, stay marvelous.